This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. We're in Beersel, Belgium for this episode of the podcast. It's Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm Jamie Bogner. Joining me today, sitting in the cafe at Oude Beersel Brewery, is Gert Christiaens. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jamie.
And of course, the brewery is Oud Beersel. And there's a beautiful, beautiful long history to this brewery. And Gert is the latest chapter of that, having revived this brewery after it closed for a short time in the early 2000s, dedicated and committed to propagating and continuing this history of Oude Gueuze and Oude Kriek here in Beersel, and a diehard fanatic for the beer style. The first time I stopped by here a number of years ago, there was no cafe, and now we are sitting in this beautiful cafe that you opened a couple of years ago. It's wonderful to see the experience that you've built, and we got to walk through the brewery a few minutes ago and see it from the street. It looks so small, and yet there is quite a brewery here, and lots of lambic and gueuze, and then of course what becomes Oude Gueuze and Oude Kriek through a process of aging and then blending. And we are going to talk about all of that. We're also going to talk about some of the exciting and interesting experiments and developments that Oud Beersel has engaged in, in various and related things, such as the wide range of ingredients that they have found that work in this kind of context. We're going to talk about acidity and appropriate and inappropriate acidity and how that works in this flavor context. Maybe we'll see if we can understand what goes into your blending mind and what some of those things coming straight out of barrels and foeders and how those express in an ultimate blended kind of form and what it takes to make that perfect blend. Doing it through speaking is never as good as doing it through tasting. But we'll see what we can cover in that. And of course, you're also doing very interesting things with almost a champagne-like method of using this spontaneous beer and creating a highly effervescent champagne-like riddled beer called Bzart. And so we can maybe talk a little bit about that. It's something that's relatively unique in the world of beer, but incredible stuff. I have a couple of old bottles even in my own cellar, and some of our friends like Lauren Limbach from now formerly of New Belgium has listed that for us as one of her favorite beers. You may remember Oud Beersel as a Craft Beer and Brewing subscriber as one of our beers of the year a few years ago. 2022. The trophy is right here. I can just remind myself of what year that was. 2022. The Oude Gueuze was one of our editor's picks for best 20 beers of 2022. And it's no surprise. Anyway, we're going to talk about all of those things. But first, G&D Chiller's biggest edge isn't just the equipment. It's their deep understanding of brewery operations. From layout to production flow, they bring real-world expertise and build reliable systems that last. Whether it's a single-stage 5H or a vertical air chiller, New Belgium Brewing recently partnered with G&D to install a propane-based Elite 290 chiller, delivering around 50% energy savings compared to CO2 systems. As Andy Collins, New Belgium's carbon-neutral engineer, put it, we're really happy to work with a partner like G&D Chillers who helped us significantly reduce the amount of HFCs used in our refrigeration systems. With 24/7 support and remote monitoring, your cold side stays dialed day or night. Learn more at gdchillers.com. And Berkeley Yeast just launched Dry Tropics London, their best-selling liquid yeast strain. Now, with all the ease-of-use benefits of dry yeast, Dry Tropics London delivers the soft, pillowy mouthfeel and juicy character you'd expect from a top-tier London ale strain, but with a serious upgrade, a burst of thiols that unleash vibrant, layered notes of grapefruit and passion fruit. A lot of brewers love the clean passion fruit you get from Tropics, but they don't want every IPA to be a tropical fruit bomb. At the dry yeast price point, you can pitch and ditch without breaking the bank. or you can co-pitch with your house strain to adjust the intensity of the notes. And with nationwide free shipping, there's never been a better time to try Dry Tropics. Order now at berkeleyyeast.com and experience the ease and impact of Dry Tropics London yeast. Also, this episode is sponsored by PakTech, delivering craft beer multi-packing you can trust. PakTech's handles are made from 100% recycled plastic and are fully recyclable, helping breweries close the loop and advance the circular economy. With a minimalist design, durable functionality you can rely on, and custom color matching, PakTech helps brands stand out while staying sustainable. Trusted by craft brewers nationwide, they offer a smarter, sustainable way to carry your beer. To learn more, visit paktech-opi.com. That's paktech-opi.com. All right, Gert, we normally start off with a little bit of background and history. The history of this brewery is a very, very long one, and then it intersects with your history somewhere around the early 2000s. Give us the brief big history, and then talk about this process of you taking over this brewery in order to help keep this spirit of Gueuze and Oude Gueuze alive.
Yeah, so Oud Beersel is an old lambic brewery from 1882. And for 4 generations, Oud Beersel was managed by the family van der Velden. So in 2002, the brewery closed down. And after 4 generations, and it was my favorite beer. I used to go here as a kid with my parents, my dad buying some traditional Gueuze and kriek. And then I worked in Brussels. I wanted, often I went to a bar in Brussels drinking the Gueuze of Oud Beersel. And then at a certain point in 2003, the owner of the bar told me, look here, these are the last bottles of Gueuze of Oud Beersel. Next time you come, you won't be able to drink that beer anymore because the brewery now closed down. That was kind of, a sad moment for me. It was my favorite beer to drink. I brought my friends to the bar to discover traditional lambic beers. And so you have to know that like before the First World War, there were about 300 lambic producers, and when Oud Beersel closed down, there were only 9 left. So for me, this was more than just saving my favorite beer. This was about saving a tradition, saving a culture, the oldest style of beer that we still have in Belgium. And so in 2003, when I heard about the closure of Oud Beersel, I reached out to the brewery, called the number. The old brewmaster, he answered. I made an appointment with him. He explained me that his nephew continued the brewery for the last 12 years after his retirement. But then the nephew, he owned the bar, he managed the bar, he managed the brewery. And at the end of 2002, he was just fed up with all the hard work, managing a bar, of course, and a brewery mainly by yourself. It's not that easy. It's always been kind of a small operation. Oud Beersel has always been quite small in the market, especially in the past, because it always been like a one-person's operation. Even the old brewmaster, for example, he worked at another brewery before taking over the brewery from his Oud Beersel from his dad, because once his dad went on retirement, then only the next generation came in. So
it wasn't making enough money for them both to work here at the same time.
Yeah, you have to imagine, I mean, in this region, we had a lot of lambic producers, but it was very local. So there was almost no distribution of lambic beers. Distribution of the beer was mainly by horse and carriage. And lambic beers on bottles, that wasn't really a good idea to transport it, because the CO2 would be released from the beer, building up a momentary moment of pressure. The corks would jump off the bottle, so that it wasn't really suited for transportation. So people actually, they went to their local
Shaking
bars.
those up in a horse-drawn carriage.
Yeah.
It sounds like a recipe for disaster.
So the people went to their local bars for drinks, and the local bars bought the beer from the local breweries. And so you had a lot of lambic producers here in the past. So that was kind of their beer, their table beer, their Pilsner beer, what people were drinking. It's just that the lambic sector changed a lot, let's say, with the First World War, when Pilsner beer was introduced in Belgium, because Pilsner beer was and still is a beer that is more easily to transport. I mean, it's once it's packaged in a bottle with a crown cap, it could easily be transported all over. And as well, with the introduction of Pilsner beer, they introduced Pilsner beer on draft. And by introducing Pilsner beer on draft, you had to put a cooling system somewhere, but the cooling system produces a lot of heat. And where do you put the cooling system? Not at your bar, you put it downstairs in the basement. But what is in the basement in all these bars, cafes in the lambic region at that time? You had like these caveaux, which are kind of walls full of bottles of lambic, of Gueuze actually, laying one on top of the other. And so bars always bought in like multiple caveaux from a brewery or from different breweries. But due to the cooling in the basement, the temperature of the basement heated up, which increased the pressure of the Gueuze on bottle. And so in a lot of these basements, these corks just jumped off, because it's all spontaneous fermentation. It's not 100% controllable. And so all these bars started to complain about the Gueuze being not stable and corks jumping off the bottles. But that was because the temperature was not the same anymore in the basements. And so many of these bars stopped producing. I stopped buying lambic beers, stopped buying Gueuze from the bars due to that. And so step by step, we had a decline in the number of lambic producers.
I just want to point out here to all of those hardcore lager fanatics, especially amongst the craft beer world, that Pilsner is the same exact thing that a lot of those brewers complain about hazy IPA today, a thing that in its time put a lot of traditional brewers out of business, that it was an innovation that was both a great beer, but also had a very devastating effect. And and I've heard that from other brewers here in Belgium. That launch of Pilsner beer in Belgium did have a serious effect on lots and lots of family breweries.
Indeed. And so, as I said, we had about like 300 producers. Oud Beersel closed down. There were only 9 left. And nowadays, I reopened Oud Beersel. We number 10. And nowadays, we're about 20 producers again in the market. So there's been a kind of positive trend again in lambic sector as well, which is very good for the preservation of the culture and the traditions, the history. And that's kind of my mission, why I started with Oud Beersel, because I started with Oud Beersel to save the beer, save the traditions, the history for the next couple of generations. I want our grandchildren to be able, at their legal age of drinking, which is faster in Belgium than in the States, to be able to enjoy a good glass of Gueuze.
Yeah. And so you then in 2003 took this over, learned the brewing process, learned how to make beer in addition to being someone who loved beer.
Yes, indeed, because I studied economics with IT management, nothing to do with beer besides enjoying good beer. And when I talked to the old brewmaster, he explained me that his nephew continued the brewery for the last 12 years, but then he didn't want to continue. But the old brewmaster, he was 77 years old at that time. So he was not going to start the production anymore. I planned on helping out in the weekends and after work. But yes, I had to make a decision and see how I could help in another way. So I started following brewing courses in Ghent. I brewed here with the old brewmaster to take over his knowledge on the brewing aspects, but also spontaneous fermentation, on the how to treat wooden barrels, all the instruments, all the whole building, and step by step, I took over everything and revived Oud Beersel in 2005. First revived with the Versalis triple. Versalis is the old medieval name of Beersel. And thanks to the launch of the triple, we were able to get some money in to invest in lambic production, because lambic and traditional Gueuze is not a beer like any other beer. It takes a lot of time. Time is almost kind of an ingredient in lambic, because to create a bottle of traditional Gueuze, the Oude Gueuze, by law, the oldest ingredient, the oldest lambic has to age for 3 years in wooden barrels. So no bank initially wanted to fund the project because there was no money coming out of it, only money coming in to invest in stock and production of lambic. So thanks to the launch of our Versalis triple, we were able to sell some beer, get some money in, start the business rolling, and then we were able to invest in the lambic production, and we kicked off in 2007 for the first time officially with an Oude Gueuze, and then step by step further developed the stock of lambic. We have about 3,000 hectoliters of lambic on wooden barrels at Oud Beersel nowadays.
And then how much of that ends up being beer in any given year? How much beer do you release in a year?
Well, that depends a bit, of course. Since COVID, the market is a bit more volatile, let's say. So it depends. I think we are in average about 1,500 hectoliters nowadays. So we are small, especially if you compare that to US breweries in general, but Belgium is a small country as well.
Sure. So maybe about 1,200 barrels in US parlance. It's what, 80.82 is our dividing factor, or a factor for. Anyway, over this kind of period, you started simple with a couple of different, with Oude Gueuze and Oude Kriek. And nowadays, the portfolio of different beers that you make is quite extensive. Everything from single barrel iterations to a variety of flavor macerated, flavors in lambic, and so that whole portfolio has grown more broad.
Yeah, correct. So we still have our base range consisting out of the Versalis beers, the top fermenting beers, and then the Oude Gueuze and the Oude Kriek. And also in the Oude Gueuze, we make different types of Oude Gueuze. So we have our regular Oude Gueuze, which is a blend of our small and our big barrels, because we have barrels from 600 liters up to 12,000 liters at Oud Beersel. And we also make a couple of special Gueuzes. We have a Gueuze aged on whiskey barrels, for example, but we also make a Gueuze with a blend of specific types of barrels. So nothing, no special character that is coming from any product that has been on the barrel before, but the origin, the size of barrel, they define actually how the lambic is tasting on these barrels. And so by selecting the right barrels, we can make a unique Gueuze with the same base recipe of the wort, actually. So we do that with, we have the special types of Gueuze, and then we have our kriek. We have a couple of krieks as well, all traditional kriek. So a Gueuze, maybe for the listeners that do not really know what the Gueuze is the blend of different lambic, like 1 to 3 year old lambic, and then it referments on bottle. And after that bottle refermentation, you get more in-depth characters, and so that's called an Oude Gueuze. Oude means old, and old stands for the old way of producing that beer, which is protected on European level. The same goes for the kriek, the Oude Kriek, but kriek means sour cherry. So in Dutch, we have a word for sour cherry, and we have a word for sweet cherry. So kers is the word for the sweet cherry, and kriek means sour cherry. So Kriek has always been made on base of lambic in the past, and then after a while, breweries started to copy that and make sweet beers out of it. But the sour cherry and a sour beer is always going to be a sour kind of beer, but very complex, because we use these cherries. We use full cherries, so we don't use juices, syrups, flavorings, colorants. It's the pure cherry with the skin and the pit. It goes on the lambic, and so lambic that's already fermented on wooden barrels, and then we take the lambic off, put it on stainless steel, and then we add the cherries for about 6 months, but the full cherry. And so it's very important to have the pit of the cherry on the lambic, because that pit gives an almond character to the beer.
Right, that kind of noyo element and that kind of that awesome nuttiness that adds depth to that. Sure. And this is a blend, obviously. You have very strong opinions about acidity and about the production of the wrong kinds of acids in this beer. And so especially in this fruiting kind of capacity, you're very careful to keep oxygen out of that process using some more modern techniques, even though that Gueuze is and base lambics are done through everything from large 1,000 hectoliter foeders to smaller wine pipes, and then of course wine barrels as well, and have this full range of size of vessels. I would love to talk about how that impacts some of that flavor expression, but maybe before we do that, give your customers a pleasant surprise with Audacia in your next IPA. Brought to you by Indie Hops, this descendant of Strata brings her own flair of catchy lilac, lavender aroma, and flavors of sweet tart berries with tangy lychee. Audacia loves family reunions with Strata and has even more fun when Citra, Simcoe, Amarillo, and others join the party. Let Audacia loose and watch the smiles spread. Indie Hop's life is short. Let's make it flavorful. And if you're like me and you've got a lot of beers at home and your regular fridge is at capacity, enter the Midea 50/50 Flex, the industry's first dual compartment, 3-way convertible freezer. Here's what all of that means for you. Options. The 50/50 has the power to be all freezer, all fridge, or a little bit of both. But if you're our listeners, you probably want to use all 20 cubic feet as a massive garage-ready beer fridge. You can also change which side the door is on or how you want the shelves to be arranged. The 50/50 totally flexes to fit your life. Plus, it's designed to maintain a stable temp even in non-climate controlled conditions, so you can crack a cold one even on the warmest days in the man cave. As for me, I'm using it to take my garage to the next level. Check out midea.com/US to get more info on this game changer today. Cheers. Also, the Beyond Beer space is booming, and Old Orchard is here for it, supplying breweries with fruit ingredients for all of your beverage needs: low, no alcohol, hard lemonades, seltzer, cider, and more. Old Orchard has supplied hundreds of industrial customers across 49 states, including nationally and internationally loved brands. So you'll be in good company. More information and free samples are waiting at oldorchard.com/brewer. That's oldorchard.com/brewer. I feel like my throat is getting dry, and maybe I need a beer before we continue this conversation.
So I can open a bottle. Good. Do you see how we serve and turn the glass first? This is for a better head stability of the foam. Yeah.
So you're twisting the glass in your hand as you pour it.
Yeah, because I'm wetting the glass with the beer so that the beer is already sticking to the glass, and then the head of the beer is sticking to the beer that is sticking to the glass. It's to take away some of the resistance, the resistance of the glass, because it's two other elements, the beer and the glass, and the foam of lambic beers fall quite fast. So.
We don't have a glass washer handy here, a glass rinser to wet that for us. So
if we do that, then we would dilute the foam more, and then the foam would fall even faster. Yeah.
So you find, that twisting, using the beer itself to cool and to coat is the way to do it.
Yeah, that's a traditional way of serving lambic beers. And this beer here that we are drinking is our cherry Oude Gueuze. So this is a very unique one. Maybe we are jumping a bit ahead, but this is a Gueuze infused with the wood of our the snipping wood of our cherry trees in the back. So we have a whole cherry orchard, a few hundred trees of Schaerbeekse cherries, a typical variety of the cherries here from this region. And every year we trim down the branches of the tree because the fruit only grows on 1-year-old wood, so we want to limit the size of the tree. And then every year we use that cherry wood to infuse on our lambic, and that cherry wood gives kind of cherry character to the beer and some tannin, some woody characters. Very unique for a golden color beer, and it tastes and smells a bit like cherries.
So 2 things. Number one, that is crazy that to get Schaerbeekse cherries to grow, you have to prune that every other year in order to get a new growth that then becomes old enough to hold cherries on it. That's, if you wonder why some of these beers are expensive, because those cherries are expensive, there's quite a bit of work that goes into getting those cherries.
Yeah, and they're very small. So normally commercial growers don't grow these because they prefer to have bigger cherries. They don't care too much about the flavor. It's more about the looks of the full cherry. But for lambic beers, we need cherries with the right character. And but because they're so small, nobody wants to pick them. It takes a whole day to pick 30 kilograms of cherries from a tree, so it's not worthwhile for people in general to pick the cherries.
Well, this beer, simply aged on the wood from that Schaerbeekse cherry tree, tastes like they were cherries macerated in the beer. It is absolutely fascinating to see just how much cherry character comes from the wood itself without any fruit present.
Yeah, really kind of, playing with your mind.
Yeah. There's another phrase for that, but that I've heard other brewers use over the last several days, but we'll leave that one out for right now. Playing with your mind. Sure. Well, let's go back and talk. So as we were walking through the brewery, you note the brew house that you have here is made of aluminum. And not necessarily suitable to brew on. No one brews in an aluminum brew house anymore.
Yeah. So before I started, before I took over Oud Beersel, 50% of the wort was produced in the old brew house here, and 50% of the wort was already produced externally according to the recipe of Oud Beersel. So when I started,
adhering by a lambic brewery, making lambic.
Yeah, by lambic brewery making lambic, but then specifically the recipe for Oud Beersel. And so when I started, I was not allowed by health safety to revive the old brew house because of the aluminum. So at that time we were still able to use copper brew houses. Nowadays, if you install a new brew house or even a second-hand brew house, it has to be stainless steel. It cannot be copper neither anymore. So yeah, when I started with Oud Beersel, then I decided to brew the wort externally 100% and focus more on the blending activity. So we do the fermentation on the wooden barrel. So after the brewing process, the wort cools down in the cool ship, and the morning after, around 6-7 o'clock in the morning, we receive the wort and we put it on the wooden barrels, and it starts fermenting on the wooden barrels for like a year, 18 months minimum. And afterwards we use that lambic to produce all of our lambic beers. So this is something quite important for lambic sector, and sometimes different to other producers of making sour beers. We use our wooden barrels not for souring the beer, but we use our wooden barrels for the micro-oxygenation. So in the fermentation of lambic, we have both aerobic and non-aerobic fermentation going on. And so we need a little bit of oxygen throughout the whole process, but we don't want to have too much oxygen because too much oxygen will produce vinegar. And it's not our idea to make vinegar beers. It's our idea to make a natural fermented beer. And so we need to create the right environment, and the wooden barrels are the right environment for producing lambic beers. If you go to any lambic brewery or blendery, you will notice that all the wooden barrels are laying horizontal. There's no one that has vertical barrels, because if you use vertical barrels, you immediately, when the level of beer goes down due to fermentation, due to evaporation, the angel share, the devil share, they say in the US as well, when the brewer starts drinking from his wooden barrels, a bit of leakage. So you always have loss of volume. And when you have loss of volume, the level of the beer goes down in your wooden barrel. On a barrel that is standing up, you immediately have a big surface of oxidation. It's filling up with air, so the oxygen touches your beer, and you immediately have a lot of oxygen. So in the end, with some higher temperature and the alcohol, you'll start producing vinegar. And it goes fast after a while, especially in summertime, when you have a big surface of oxidation, then you suddenly start to make beers with a lot of vinegar. When the wooden barrels are laying down, you need to lose like half of your volume of your wooden barrel before you reach the maximum surface of oxidation. So by laying your barrels down, well, it's another type of barrel, but by laying them down, you avoid exposure to a lot of oxygen. So that's very important, because mostly the sourness coming from lambic is not due to oxidation. It can be that some producers don't care too much about oxidation in the end, but if you want to make a good lambic, you should not over oxidate your beer. Most of the sourness is coming from the fermentation. So we have like 4 main phases of fermentation in lambic beer. So we have an enterobacterial fermentation, but that's kind of quick, about 10 days. After which we have on the lambic just a Saccharomyces fermentation, so producing the same kind of characters than on any other ales. We have like the isomyl acetate. It ferments the simple sugars, but not the complex sugars. So you keep that kind of round character in the lambic. It's a fruity beer. You keep still some of the hoppiness in the lambic. Even though we use the aged hops for lambic. I'll come into that later. And then, let's say about 3 months into the fermentation phase, there's the acidification phase. And that acidification phase, which is very crucial to lambic, it's a bacterial fermentation, all spontaneous. All these phases that I'm mentioning, they're spontaneous, so we do not activate by adding organisms. It's just nature that regulates it by itself when it starts. And so we have the acidification phase with lactic fermentation, acidic fermentation, malolactic fermentation. So these bacteria, they produce a lot of acidity, but that acidity is very complex at the same time, because it's due to fermentation, and there are different organisms that are producing sourness in the lambic. So it's not one directional sour. It has a lot of complexity in that sourness, but it's more lactic fermentation than acidic fermentation. Of course, you have the bacteria that produce the acidity, but acidic acidity afterwards can be produced also by the oxidation, as I mentioned before, and that's something that we have to avoid. But even by the Brettanomyces, for example, so you have after another 3 months into the fermentation, so we have 6 months in fermentation process, then step by step the Brettanomyces start to wake up. These Brettanomyces, they're the wild yeast, known for the wild fermentation, but that wild fermentation that we have is spontaneous as well. So we do not add any Brettanomyces from a bag to the lambic. It's all coming from the air. And so these Brettanomyces yeast, they're very slow, but they're very strong. And so they only start fermenting the lambic once all the other organisms have finished, because all the other organisms, they go away fast with the simple sugars, but after a while there's too much alcohol, there's the pH is too low, there's no simple sugar left anymore in the beer, so they cannot
You've also
thrive.
very much made a turbid lambic wort with long chain dextrins that are very specifically meant to not break down for those easier yeasts, so that you leave something left in the beer for that Brettanomyces to work on.
That's on the turbid mash brewing process.
Right.
So that's when we take out some of the wort at the beginning. So we have a lot of complex sugars to feed these Brettanomyces. And because we really want them to be active and for a long time. And so these Brettanomyces, they start to ferment all these complex sugars. But by fermenting all these complex sugars, they not only make the beer dry, they also transform a lot of fruity esters that we have in the beer. So like the isomyl acetate, for example, it completely transforms, and it goes into characters that you don't find in regular beers. And so by the end of the fermentation, so let's say if
isoamyl acetate, typically associated with banana as a character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that isoamyl acetate, a banana character, you have that in a lambic of 6 months old, for example, but it should not be part of a bottle of Gueuze, because Brettanomyces will destroy that. So if you have a bottle of Gueuze in the market and it tastes like banana, then it cannot be a Gueuze, because there's no Brettanomyces that have destroyed that isoamyl acetate character. So after 18 months in the fermentation process, you cannot recognize lambic as a regular beer anymore. It doesn't taste like it. It doesn't smell like it. It has the sourness due to that acidification phase. It's dry because the Brettanomyces, they fermented all the complex sugars, or almost all the complex sugars. Also, there's no hoppy character to it because we use old hops. But why do we use old hops? I mean, everybody, or most of the people that are a bit aware about lambic beers, they know we use old hops. And it's not because of the old hops that have a bit of cheesy character. And I mean, we even do dry hop lambic and dry hop Gueuze. So dry hopping on the hoppy characters of the hop are very nice, except for the bitterness, because due to that fermentation phase, the third fermentation phase, there's a lot of sourness being produced, and sour and bitter are flavors that do not match well together. So we try to avoid the sourness, the bitterness with the sourness, and so by aging our hops before we use them in the brewing process, we have oxidated hops. And the oxidated bitterness, as human beings, we are not able to taste it. I'm sure in the US, a lot of your listeners, they all know how difficult it is to get the IPAs as fast in the market as possible, because otherwise it will oxidate after a while. And the bitterness of the IPA is completely gone, and all these characters. So that's why we want to have.
Right.
We do not want the hoppy characters. We have no problem with all the hoppy flavors, but we don't want to have that bitterness. The same thing actually goes for the wooden barrels. So in the lambic sector, we don't change our wooden barrels all the time. And when we buy wooden barrels in general, we buy second-hand wooden barrels. Not for the price. They're, of course, cheaper wooden barrels, and it's interesting to buy them cheaper than more expensive, of course. But nowadays, since the kind of last 10, 15 years, second wooden barrels are not that cheap anymore. But we use...
Although apparently coming down now that those Scottish whiskey makers are buying fewer and fewer, as that demand is settled down.
Okay, I thought the prices went up due to the craft beer sector, but... Okay. So
I should say the European prices were more, I think, influenced by, we'll blame that on the whiskey makers, but,
okay.
and yes, in the United States, maybe not quite as many barrels going to those. And at the same time, more, and I mean, the whiskey market kind of blew up over the last number of years, and now there's a surplus of those barrels, I think, on the market.
But still, like before, we could go to wineries and we could buy wooden barrels because they wanted to get rid of their wooden barrels.
Right.
And then with the craft industry using a lot of wooden barrels, I've seen that there are companies that started to specialize in the second-hand market of wooden barrels. And every wooden barrel, no matter what kind of product that was on that wooden barrel before, is kind of put in the in sales as kind of a premium wooden barrel. And suddenly you have to pay premium prices for second-hand wooden barrels. Whereas wineries, and especially in the European sector, wineries, they pay, okay, they cost quite a lot new wooden barrels, but they can define, I want this barrel, it's like that character, it's perfect for what they want. And then wineries are part of the agricultural sector, whereas breweries are industry sector. I assume that's the same in the US, but in the EU, the wineries, a lot of wineries receive subsidies because they're part of the agricultural sector. And so they get subsidized on purchasing new wooden barrels. Then they use their wooden barrels, and once they don't need them anymore, they sell them to us, and probably at their kind of cost price. So their wooden barrels don't really cost them a lot anymore. If you take off the subsidies that they receive and the money that they get from the breweries that buy the second-hand wooden barrels, they don't pay a lot for the barrel, but we pay a lot for the barrels. But all these things will change. Of course, they will find a new balance. It's like every industry is facing difficulties now, we'll go to a new equilibrium, I assume. So wooden barrels, they contain, besides the cocoa vanilla character, the new wooden barrels, they also have a lot of tannins. And especially if we look at European wood, European oak, and so the tannins, they're kind of hard bitter, and that hard bitterness is not matching well with the sourness being produced in the lambic. So that's why we always use old wooden barrels. We are not really interested in the flavors of the wood anyway, because we use the wooden barrels for micro-oxygenation. So we buy wooden barrels that have been used before several times for another product, mainly wine, because that's what's available to us. Belgium is surrounded by a couple of wine countries. We have France, we have Germany, a bit further away we have Italy, some barrels come even from Portugal or from Spain. So that's most of the time that we buy our wine barrels in these regions here.
Yeah. So you then use different kinds of sizing on that. Everything from a very, very large 1,000 hectoliter foeders, which help accomplish exactly what you were talking about in terms of minimizing oxygen exposure, because obviously the larger of volume of liquid there means that there is so much more liquid that is farthest from any contact point there. And then you go down to smaller, pipes, which are large barrels, and then even regular sized wine barrels. And I would love to talk about what the effect is of aging what is then lambic in each one of these sizes, and how that changes the maturation time, but also maybe even the flavor. Before we talk about that, Brightly Software, a Siemens company, partners with organizations at every stage of their asset lifecycle journey. Brightly is a complete asset management and operations software that enhances organizational sustainability, compliance, and efficiency through data-driven decision-making, streamline maintenance, simplify capital planning, and/or optimize resources with solutions uniquely designed to support long-term goals. Learn more at brightlysoftware.com. Also, in Flanders, beer is more than a drink. It's a cultural thread woven through history, cuisine, and community. Today, microbreweries honor tradition while experimenting with bold flavors, and young chefs embrace zero-waste cooking, local ingredients, and inventive beer-infused dishes. Even chocolatiers are reimagining Belgian pralines with surprising pairings. Across kitchens and breweries, expertise and creativity drive a passion for flavor rooted in Belgium's DNA. Raising a glass of Belgian beer means savoring centuries of craftsmanship, innovation, and culinary artistry. Come to Flanders in 2026 to celebrate the 10th anniversary of UNESCO recognition and sample this unique combination of creative brewing tradition and culinary exploration. Let's talk about vessel size and how that impacts things. You have this range. Some of it's based on efficiency, but some of it, is driven by other concerns.
Yeah, so when I started at Oud Beersel, we only had these like 650 liter barrels, these old pipes, between 70 and 130-year-old wooden barrels used for port wine in the past. These barrels were shipped from Portugal with a boat to the harbors of Bruges and Antwerp. The wine was bottled there and the barrels stayed behind, and so these barrels, they were bought up by lambic producers and then being used for lambic ever since. But since a lot of lambic producers closed down, others bought up the old barrels and the other equipment, and so these barrels have a lot of history and have gone from one producer to another producer. And so we still have some of these old pipes here. We make a special gueuze out of that, these old pipes. 650 liters is like 3 times like a bourbon barrel or something, right, that kind of size. These barrels are quite old, and because they're quite old, they're a bit more damaged because we take them out of the rows, we clean them in a corner in the barrel room, and then we have to build up the whole row again and fill them every time. So due to that process, they let more air going through as well, and so these the lambic on these barrels, they have a little bit more oxygen, they produce a little bit more vinegar. But because these barrels have been used for so long time in lambic sector, they also have a lot of lambic character that they give to the beer. So the spontaneous fermentation on lambic, you have the inoculation on the cool ship that we mentioned before, but the morning after, it goes on the wooden barrels. And if your wooden barrel has been used several times for lambic, you have that lambic as well inside of the wood. So in like the first 1.5 centimeters of the wood, you have like the lambic and all these organisms of the lambic. And the more you use that wooden barrel, the more you cultivate all these organisms, and you have the pure organisms for lambic. And so because we didn't talk...
And having said that, you do clean these barrels between each of the uses.
Oh yeah, all the time. We clean them every time. So
and so it is not as if you're simply taking the same culture that what was already, pitched and then laying new beer over the existing culture. It is what's just impregnated in the wood itself.
I think one of I've traveled a lot. I've traveled many times to the US, tasted a lot of beers and sour beers on the market. And what I concluded for myself is that in general, I do not like the beers that have been aged on wooden barrels and that wooden barrels have not been cleaned, because you have a lot of dead yeast cells and other organisms at the bottom of your barrel, and you take some beer away and you add some fresh wort or some fresh beer on it, and you keep on adding new beer on top of all these kind of cells that are open and give all these kind of bad characters to it. So with lambic, we start from scratch every time. But the reuse of the wooden barrels is very important. The maintenance of the wooden barrels is very important, because if your wooden barrel has kind of an infection of acidic acidity, bacteria, then of course you will produce vinegar next time. If you didn't clean your wooden barrels well and you have mold in your wooden barrels, for example, then next time you will have mold in your beer. So it's very important. Barrel management is like one of the key things in lambic beer. So we always empty a barrel, or we only have status full or empty. We don't have anything in between. Exceptionally, when we have a brew, we have to divide it over different barrels, and then of course the last barrel is not 100% full. But then the beer starts fermenting on the wooden barrels, so the level goes down, and then we use our last barrel to top up all the other barrels. But we don't leave that beer for half a year on that wooden barrel. We take that beer off, we top up the other barrels, and we clean that wooden barrel again.
But how long into the process do you then top them up?
It depends how fast fermentation goes, because if we do it too fast and the beer is still fermenting a lot, then all these barrels are going to foam over again and everything. So it's like finding the right balance. So the brewing season for lambic is like in the cold period of the year. And so if we do that in winter time, so from mid-October to end of April, so we can, if fermentation goes slower because the temperature in the brewery is lower, then we can top up faster. If it's in late spring, then fermentation is very heavy, and then we have to watch out that we don't start fermentation again, because with the warm temperatures everything kicks in immediately. So really depends a bit, it's like you cannot put any formula on there, because you will need to make sure that that barrel is empty. You need to clean it. You need to fill it up probably before the end of the brewing season and everything. So it's like it's a big puzzle all the time.
Sure. Here you've been bottling and emptying out barrels, because here we are in December and it's it is lambic brewing season, and so you pull beer out of barrels so that you can then, over the same course of the season, fill them back up with new beer that you all are making.
Yes, and normally we should have been brewing already in the last few months, but now we are in a barrel revision phase. So because I've started 20 years ago with Oud Beersel, and after 15 years, it's about time to revisit all these barrels. And so we are now shortening the rings on our foeders to strengthen, to make sure that they close very well. So we take out a little bit of the iron in a ring. We open the ring, take a little bit of iron out, and we close the rings again, and we are putting them on the fooder. So we are making sure that there's not going to be any leakage, but not even any air going through in between the staves and anything. So that's very important. And in this is the first time that we do this, but therefore we are not able to fill our barrels now. We're going to fill them beginning of next year, once we've gone through the whole process, because now we can move lambic from one full barrel to an empty barrel that has been repaired, and then we can repair the barrel that we just emptied, and so forth. And once that's done, we fill up all the barrels, and we'll brew a bit more in spring next year.
Sure. Well, we didn't really talk about what the difference in size means in terms of how those mature.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that, because you have these 1,000 hectoliters versus a smaller wine barrel, and do those work at the same kind of pace? Or do they work at a different pace, or do they have different kind of flavor expressions based on some of this scale?
Yeah, size is important. That's one of the things. And 1,000 hectoliters, I would not be able to handle 1,000 hectoliters. We have barrels up to 150, 120 hectoliters.
I don't know why I said 1,000 hectoliters.
But
100 hectoliters, yeah.
It's like 120, which is already huge. We have in total like 3,000 hectoliters. So if we have like three barrels of 1,000, that would be our full building here.
Please make fun of my metric conversion because it's terrible. I keep trying, but I'm not great at it.
I've never tried with American barrels and everything. I still don't understand. So I know that it's hard for you to do the hectoliters, and I'm not good at the barrel sizes neither.
I've set my watch to centigrade or Celsius so that I can at least, and I did that several weeks before I made this trip, so I can have a better idea of what temperature baselines should be. And I'm still not very good at it, but I'm going to keep trying to get there.
Temperatures are very easy. Yes, like 0 is freezing, 100 is boiling, so and everything in between. It's like it makes sense to us at least. Okay, let's go to the barrel sizes. So it's barrel size, but it's not only barrel size. It's the type of wood. It's the origin of the wooden barrels for what they've been used before. It's the age of the wooden barrels. It's the density of the wood that is very important. But the size in general, if a wooden barrel, so the surface of the wood compared to the volume, that ratio is very important. On a small barrel, you have more surface of wood compared to the volume of beer than on a big barrel, which means that on a small barrel, surface of wood, air goes through the wood, so you have more air going through the wood, touching the beer. Air means oxygen, so you have more oxygen oxygenating the beer, and so with more oxygen, it's like fire. You have wind blowing over fire, the fire goes fast, but the fire goes kind of a bit wild in all kinds of direction. It's not so controllable if you put wind on the fire. And whereas if you let the fire burn gently, it takes more time, but it's more controllable. And so these big wooden barrels, they have less surface of oxygen compared to the volume of beer. So the fermentation goes slower. It takes at least 6 months more to reach the same level of fermentation, but the flavors of the beer are more refined, whereas the flavors of the beer on the small barrels are more kind of extremer, more jumping out, and you produce a bit more acidic acidity on the small barrels than on the big barrels. So you have to watch out more on the small barrels to not overproduce acidic acidity. On the big barrels, we've never had big barrels with a lot of acidic acidity.
So then do you use, say, the 100 hectoliter foeders or thereabouts as maybe a bit of a kind of center of a blend or a core of a blend, and then pull in some of the character from smaller barrels? Or does your typical blend, do you kind of know where it's going to come from because you have history with some of these and how they've tasted in the past and how you pull those together? How do you think about starting to craft blends of these lambic into what will become a gueuze?
Yeah, blending is not an exact science neither, but for our regular Oude Gueuze, we use the lambic from our bigger barrels, from our foeders. It can be 40 hectoliter foeders to 120 hectoliter foeders, because these lambics are very refined and they have a nice base. And then we add some lambic from the smaller barrels to give kind of a punch to the beer. Whereas we have a Gueuze van der Velde, for example, for every couple of years we do that for in honor of the founder of the brewery. And so we are at Oude Gueuze van der Velde 142 for the 142 years of Oud Beersel. And we only use foeder lambic, so it's a very refined Gueuze. But then with the old pipes, we make a Gueuze as well, only with the lambic from these pipes, a bit more character, a bit more acidic acidity. But the nice thing about, and that's very special about lambic as well, so if you have all that acidic acidity and it goes on bottle, and then it ferments, and then afterwards the Brettanomyces kick in. But these breads, they kick in on bottle also only after these 6-8 months and give that kind of more special Gueuze character. But if your Gueuze has a bit too much acidity, these Brettanomyces, they have the capacity of producing acidic acidity as well. So not only the acidic acids bacteria, but also the Brettanomyces, they can produce acidic acidity in contact with air. But if they are in an environment without oxygen, they are able to reduce the acidic acidity. And so a Gueuze with a bit too much acidic acidity over time becomes more mellow, but it keeps a kind of fruity character of the acidic acidity, which is very nice. So yeah, that's one of the special traits about lambic.
Is there anything to, now you're not going to have a lot of pickup of tannin and wood character because these foeders that you're aging in and these old, very old pipes, like these are just extraordinarily old barrels. And so there's not a lot of actual wood character that you're pulling out.
We get some old wood character. So you taste old wood in there, but you don't taste vanilla or cocoa flavors. Right. But then on the other side, I mean, we're talking about the size of the wooden barrel. Of course, it's important to mention as well that the bigger wooden barrel, the thicker the staves. So it's not only the surface of the wood compared to the volume of beer, but also the thickness of the staves. So the staves let less oxygen go through. But then, I mean, the type of wood, because the density of the wood is very important. I mean, if you use acacia wood compared to oak, well, acacia it's cheaper. It will not give tannins when you buy new barrels, but it will let a lot of oxygen go through, so your beer will ferment faster, but it will oxidate as well faster. So that's kind of something you should be aware of when you buy wooden barrels. But then also the origin from these wooden barrels, what have they been used before? And I mean, it's always a gamble. You never know. You know it's being used for that wine or this wine, but in the end, what kind of character will they give? Because initially they will give you some of that wine character, and that's okay. It's some lambic with wine character. Either you can put that in the market with the lambic with a bit of special character of that wine, or you blend that in with the kriek and it disappears with the cherries. But then after a couple of years, you get the wine character is out, but all of these organisms from the lambic are still not yet in the wood completely. So it's kind of a lambic, but it's missing a little bit of character. So only after like 10-15 years you get like pure lambic character out of your wooden barrels. So lambic is not about just making a couple of batches and blending everything together. You need to have your barrels trained for lambic. And even then, when we have barrels that have been used 15 years or more, then when we take one brew and we divide that over different barrels, every barrel will be a little bit different. So you can recognize the style. You can say, okay, this is my lambic, but you taste one barrel next to the other one. It's the same brew, and they still are tasting different. And that's because of one, what organisms are active in that barrel, but also the origin, how these barrels have been treated before and everything. So, and that's very hard to say when you buy wooden barrels, because there's no kind of passport with the whole history and what they've done or not done and hidden and on that wooden barrel.
It's not like when you buy a car and you have a service record, a maintenance record for that car. I think it's fascinating to square up this idea of you needing to have fresh and clean barrels versus having these barrels with that experience, over time, producing the best kind of lambic. And so just, to be clear, and as we were walking through upstairs, like you have an example of an old barrel with the chains that were once used to clean out the insides. But you go through and use a hot water bath on every barrel between uses.
So we use high pressure warm water.
High pressure warm water.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we don't put them in a bath. We clean them only with water. We don't use any chemicals.
Just a spray ball that's spraying high pressure hot water.
Yeah, that's it. Just warm water with a spray ball. We don't want to damage.
Not full sanitation, 180 degrees.
No.
Definitely below that. Okay.
No, absolutely not. Don't damage the wood.
Yeah.
It's very important. I mean, that's a common mistake, I think, with a lot of craft breweries that are using wooden barrels. They have no idea how to use wooden barrels. They think they need to sanitize everything. Of course, it depends on what type of beer you want to make, but wooden barrels, don't use wooden barrels if you want to make clean beers. That's not the purpose of a wooden barrel. Of course, if you buy a spirit barrel, you buy a bourbon barrel, and you say, I put a batch of my ale on the bourbon barrel, and you extract flavor of the bourbon on your beer, you're fine. I mean, the bourbon barrel is disinfected with the bourbon. So you put your beer on there, nothing happens. You extract the flavor of the bourbon, and you have a little bit of oxidation on your beer. Your beer ages nicely. It's perfect. The thing is, what are you going to do afterwards? Are you going to reuse a wooden barrel? Do you want to get a second kind of pull out of that bourbon out of the wooden barrels? There's still some bourbon left in there, not as much as before, but how are you going to clean the wooden barrel? So let's imagine you steam the wooden barrel because you're afraid of infection and everything, so you kill everything inside. Perfect. You can use that wooden barrel again, and it will have a bit of less bourbon character, and it will be kind of sanitized, hopefully completely sanitized, and you can use that wooden barrel again. But then, once you steam the wooden barrel, what are you going to do with a wooden barrel? Do you want to reuse that wooden barrel again for other beers? And you think, oh, I'm going to steam it again, I'm going to clean it again, and it will be sanitized. No, because if you take wood is a natural material. And if you add water on wood, imagine you have a sheet of paper and you add water to the sheet of paper. That sheet of paper is going to expand. The same with your wood. The wood is going to absorb the water. If you put warm water onto wood, the expansion of the wood is going to be faster. But it's not going to gently expand. It's going to expand in all kinds of directions because it has to move. It feels resistance from that stave, So one stave is going to jump out on top of another stave. The moment this happens, you have extra surface in your wooden barrel. Your wooden barrel is not like round anymore inside. There are kind of all kinds of corners and angles in your wooden barrel that you are not able to clean. And so you will have organisms growing on there in the future that will afterwards come into your beer. So if you steam your wooden barrels, you're good for the first time, but you destroy your wooden barrels for afterwards.
Interesting. That contractive, expansive and contractive process then becomes the thing that throws the inside out of whack.
The same with the chains. I mean, we used to clean wooden barrels with chains, and now we clean it with warm water and high pressure. But the chains initially, when the wooden barrel was turning around and these chains were inside, these chains, they scrape the barrel from the inside. But also when they scrape the barrel from the inside, it's not like a clean rub from the inside. They also take pieces of wood. And these pieces of wood are kind of still attached on one side on the stave. So you immediately have a lot of surface of wood that can get infected. And if you put wort on there, then you can get infected wort. So since Oud Beersel, we used that cleaning installation till the end of 2008. And then in 2009, we went to that new cleaning method. And thanks to the introduction of that new cleaning method, we were also able, besides the old pipes, to clean food, to install fooders and clean fooders. So since 2009, we have the big barrels at Oud Beersel. Before we didn't have any big barrels. But thanks to this, customers told me a few years later that they see a consistent rise in quality of our lambics. And that was the biggest investment that we did at that time, because 2008, that was like when I started. I worked full time since 2007 at Oud Beersel, but I was still unpaid. It was kind of my hobby that got out of hand.
Sure.
There was still no income, and that was like a big investment for me at the time. And but thanks to that investment, people recognized that our quality was going up and up and up every time we cleaned that barrel again and again and again. It was the lambic that came out of these barrels became better and better and better.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about ingredients, because I think this is another place where you shine. There is a baseline to the beer that you make. Obviously, it's a common recipe between these, and then but what you have specialized in, and one of the things that has kept creating a procession, or a series of new releases that have interesting flavors, interesting ingredients that work well within this flavor of lambic and gueuze. Talk about your creative process behind this in terms of developing, how you think about these flavors of ingredients, whether that's rhubarb or green walnuts or some of the others. Talk about some of what those flavors are, and then how you go about working with those flavors and finding a place for them and the right kind of blend within lambic and gueuze that works with some of those flavors.
Yeah, so we are not really specialized in fruity beers. We make fruity beers, but we have a very limited range of fruity beers. The cherries is the fruit that we use most, because the fruitiness of the cherries stays nicely on lambic even after the Brettanomyces kick in. We use rhubarb, because rhubarb, when I was young, I had that in my garden, and I loved to just eat rhubarb like that. And the sourness of rhubarb fits nicely into the sourness of lambic without increasing the feeling of sour. So it's like complementary. It adds to the complexity, but it doesn't make the beer more sour, the rhubarb. We have the green walnut, for example. Green walnut has been, I think, our first special lambic beer, besides our traditional Gueuze kriek. Because initially, when I started with Oud Beersel, I didn't have a lot of barrels, and step by step I built up the stock. And only in 2016 we added these biggest barrels of 60 and 120 hectoliters. So before that, most of the lambic that we had was reserved to produce traditional Gueuze and traditional kriek. I didn't want to jump into producing all kinds of specialties and not having our base beers in the market, because my aim is safeguarding these lambic beers for the next couple of generations. If you don't have them, you cannot save them. So main focus was Oude Gueuze, Oude Kriek. And then I studied in the past, I studied 1 year in Italy. So I did my studies in Brussels, but one of these years in 1998 and 1999, I did 1 year of studies in Italy as an exchange project. And I became friends with an Italian sommelier, because I went to the wine bar, tasting all the wines and seeing what Italy has to offer. And then at home, he made a couple of liquors in Italy. They make liquors at home, and they made nocino. And nocino is a liquor based on green walnuts. And so I became a big fan of traditionally made nocino, aged like 5, 10, 20 years on bottle. It's amazing, the homemade nocino. And when I came back and started with Oud Beersel, at my parents' orchard, we initially picked Schaerbeekse cherries. And so that's like mid of July. And the green walnuts, they're ripe well, they're unripe walnuts, but they're at their point of ripeness that we need them to produce nocino. And with my wife, we started, while we were at the cherry orchard, we said, okay, let's take some walnuts and let's make our own nocino. But in the end, we drink nocino in Italy, but at home we drink Gueuze most of the time. So I said, okay, let's do something else with these walnuts, because building up that stock of nocino, we're never going to finish that. So I said, okay, let's do a test with the walnuts on the lambic. And then we added walnuts on the lambic. So we take these walnuts when they're unripe, they're green from the outside. You have to really pull them from the branches of the tree. And when you cut them open, so the kind of shell inside is white. It's not brown yet. It's not hard yet. You can still cut it with a knife. And the walnut has to be like gelatinous inside. And that's the right moment. That's how they do it for the nocino in Italy. We had people from the judges from the nocino competition in Italy coming over to Oud Beersel as well, and explaining us how they produce a nocino and everything. It's been nice cultural exchange. And so we put the walnuts on the lambic, but the walnuts have a lot of bitterness. It's so hard. It's like a bitterness that when you drink it, it goes down and it burns like vinegar almost. And so the first months, it wasn't drinkable. It was so hard, so bitter. But because that bitterness over time oxidates, then it becomes more mellow. And so it needs at least 10 months. These walnuts need to sit 10 months on the lambic, on the tank, before you get kind of the nice balance, and then you get these earthy green notes. And so afterwards we discovered that in some countries they eat like pickled green walnuts and everything, so which is not the culture of Belgium, but very interesting. And we were the only one, and still are the only lambic producer that is making a lambic with green walnuts. And we've inspired a lot of breweries with that first special beer that we brought out. But that was just because my history with Italy, and now I wanted to use kind of an ingredient from one of the drinks I loved in Italy onto traditional lambic beer. So these are some of the fruits that we use, but besides the fruits, Oud Beersel has evolved since 2018 more towards infused lambics. So we are using spices on lambic beer. And what I said earlier is that the Brettanomyces, they're able to kind of transform all these fruity characters. And I find it always a shame when you drink a lambic beer, you buy a bottle, 75, you paid some money for that bottle, it has a special fruit on it, and then when you drink it, you don't taste the fruit anymore. It tastes more like a gueuze with a kind of a weird color and a flavor that you cannot really comprehend where it's coming from. Whereas if you drink that fresh out of the brewery, you will taste the fruit. So these Brettanomyces, they transform these fruity characters. But my answer to that is not my answer to this problem, but it's like a consequence of that problem. And my answer to the craft beer movement initiated by the US, because in Belgium we have very traditional bars. You go to a bar, you find top fermenting beers, all the blondes, double, triple. You don't find a lot of bars with IPAs. So you don't have a lot of these craft bars where you rotate kegs all the time. But at these craft beer bars all over the world now, you can sell one barrel of lambic, and then they say, okay, that's it. We've had your lambic, so maybe in 2 years we can serve another keg of your lambic. But I mean, we don't make a new brew every time. It's always the same recipe that we do. So I said, okay, we have to find our kind of approach to how we can still do something with very traditional lambic, because my aim is for people to discover traditional lambic, but we want to make it accessible for the newer generations, accessible for people interested in discovering something, but maybe a traditional Gueuze and a traditional kriek, they're just too old for as a product, as an image of a product for them, because it's the beer that their parents maybe liked, so they want to drink something else, they want to enjoy something else.
There's this adventurous drinker that always wants to try some new things, and if that adventurous side of drinker aligns with lambic, now it's a smaller group of lambic drinker who is that adventurous drinker. And so you need to make a few things for them so that they can enjoy that spirit of adventure, but not, and do that at the kind of volume that's manageable and sustainable for a brewery of this size.
Yes. And so we had to find our way in this. And what we came up, because when I was in Italy as well, my friend there, he made grappa and then used his flowers, rose flowers from his garden to infuse the grappa. And I really loved that kind of rose character in the grappa. And then so the second special beer that we brought out was a rose lambic infused with rose petals. And that's in 2018 for the first time that we released such a beer. But also closely followed by an Earl Grey infused lambic, for example. And so we started to use spices, being flowers, being tea, but also leaves. For example, initially I think we used olive leaf on lambic, giving kind of a Mediterranean character to the lambic. But we use peppers, we used coffee, we use a lot of different spices. And the nice thing about this is, one, the flavors are very stable, because the Brettanomyces don't change these flavors that we add to the beer.
They're not adding any sugar either in the way that fruit definitely
correct.
does.
Yes. So we are not triggering them anymore. Also, it is possible for us to take a 120 hectoliter fooder and split it over different tanks and make small batches and do an infusion, because we don't make special brews for every beer we make. It's always the same lambic. So we have to be able to make a special beer by splitting it over tanks. And it's a bridge between cultures, and it brings out the lambic from the traditional Gueuze and kriek, and it makes a bridge to cultures. Like one of the first collabs that we made was with our Japanese importer, and he shipped us bamboo leaf from Japan. I mean, who knows how bamboo leaf tastes like, right? You might know how lambic tastes like and say, oh, I'm interested in lambic with bamboo leaf. What is this? And you want to taste the bamboo leaf. But the Japanese people, they know how bamboo leaf tastes like, but they have no idea how lambic tastes like. So they're like, oh, Belgian beer with bamboo leaf? Let's try that. And so we have like two different angles, two different approaches, but we have that kind of bridge between cultures. And we've done that with different countries. Now we have with our importer from Chile. We have currently, it's a reproduction that we have on tank now. It's with merken, which are sun-dried chili peppers from Chile, with some coriander. And it's a spice they use on everything they cook. So in Chile as well, they don't know what lambic is. But if it's lambic with merken, they know their merken. And it's like, oh, a beer with merken. And they go for it and they want a spicy beer. And it's like, oh, this is sour spicy. They discover flavors. But for us, this is kind of a new way on letting people discover lambic beers. We had an event in a tap takeover in a bar in Zurich, in Switzerland. And then people came in that bar and said, okay, please, 2 IPAs. And the owner of the bar looked at the guys and said, sorry, guys, this is a tap takeover of Oud Beersel. There's no IPA. Oh, but we come here. We want to drink an IPA. Like, oh, I'm sorry, there's only lambic beers. Like, oh, we don't want to drink lambic beer. You have a lambic beer infused with Earl Grey. I like Earl Grey. Okay. They started drinking the lambic on draft with Earl Grey. They moved on to the lambic with Lapsang Swoshong, which is a smoked black Chinese tea. And then they drank like 6 beers on draft. And then in the end of the evening, they were sharing a big bottle of Oude Gueuze together. And these customers, they would have left if they wouldn't have seen that lambic with the Earl Grey infused on draft. They would never have taken a seat and shared the bottle of Gueuze. And maybe nowadays these people are still enjoying once in a while a good bottle of Oude Gueuze. And that's part of my mission, getting people into these traditional lambic beers, because if nobody drinks them, this is a style that is going to be obliterated. So I want to safeguard this. So we need a modern way of approaching customers, other generations, to trigger them into discovering very traditional products. And also, what is very special about our infused lambics is that we use for our infused lambics only the lambic from our big barrels, mainly the 120 hectoliter foeders. Sometimes a smaller one, but in general 120 hectoliter foeders, because that beer is the most refined. And when we take a very refined lambic, we can add other character. When we take a lambic from a small barrel, then it's already too expressive, and then it's very hard to balance out the flavors of the spices that we want to add.
So having a good, consistent baseline refined lambic is the real key to layering these ingredients on top of it.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking for a while now. I want to finish on one note, and that is one of the things you are excited about in this effect of preserving lambic and Oude Gueuze and Oude Kriek is this evolving kind of protection for the definition of what these beers are. You are also the president of Horal, the organization.
The High Council of Traditional Lambic Beers. It's in Dutch. It's an abbreviation in Dutch.
And so that group in particular has been working within the European Union to solidify a definition that will next year become a legal definition of what these beers are?
So nowadays, these beers are already defined on European level. Since 1997, there's a protection on European level. On lambic beers, we're just going to strengthen that definition, increase that definition to even better protect lambic beers. I think it's something we have to do as a sector to protect the styles of beers if we want to safeguard these for the future, and making it even like harder for us to make the official version of the Gueuze, because we want to also the quality standards of Oude Gueuze in the market to be sharpened. That's very important. I mean, if you drink a bottle of Oude Gueuze, you should really know what you're getting. It's not like a gamble that you have a good bottle or a bad bottle. It's the same with any beer style. If you try a beer style and you try it for the first time in your life and you say, I didn't like that New Zealand IPA beer, then you're never going to drink that anymore. So, I mean, it's very important that the first beer that you come in contact with, that it's kind of a good quality. The same that you do with champagne, the same that you do with any kind of wine or spirits or something. You don't always have the opportunity to try multiple, and sometimes it's like you have different choices and you say, I try this, this is not good, so I try something completely different, and you'll never jump to it again.
What are the core tenets of that quality? What are some of the key points that you define as quality in this context?
So very important is the beer has to it has to be completely natural. So it has to be spontaneous fermentation. It has to have, of course, a blend of 1 to 3 year old lambic fermented on wooden barrels, which is very important. So completely spontaneous fermentation. And then, I mean, it should contain a lot of sourness from the lactic acidity and some of the acidic acidity, but it should not taste like vinegar. It should taste like a good beer with a nice refreshing balanced character. No additive, no colorant. It's like a lot of parameters are defined, and that's very important for quality regulation.
Yeah, yeah. And then let's finish with a bigger picture question. You've been working at this since you relaunched the brewery in 2005. It's 2025. It's about to be 2026. What do you hope for? You're now at 20 years of this latest era of Oud Beersel. What would you like to see in the next 20 years of this brewery? Because that will take you to a point where you will be at the same phase as that retired brewmaster, and and yet this legacy is obviously very deeply important to you, and continuing this and maintaining this and making sure that there is going to be someone else to also take the baton and from you in the future has to also be always on your mind. This has been a big challenge for all of the makers of Gueuze and Oude Gueuze in this area. It was certainly, for the neighbors here in Beersel from Driefonteinen, a challenge there. It's been, this is the thing. How do you? What do the next 20 years look like for you?
So 20 years, and in these first 20 years, a lot of things have changed already. So I came out of I started in a sector that was in decline, and Oud Beersel was the last brewery that closed down. And since Oud Beersel, there's kind of been a revival in the sector. Nowadays, we're like 20 lambic producers, but the market is shrinking. The whole beer market worldwide is shrinking in general, and of lambic beer as well, the market is shrinking. And so with more producers in the market, it becomes more difficult for all producers to have, everybody wants a piece of the smaller pie. So we are first going through another transition period, I assume, where some existing lambic producers will cease their activities because there's no viability, there's no growth, and I think we'll need to sit out this phase in the next couple of years. On the short term, next year, 2026, for example, I mean, there's a couple of positive things for lambic sector. There's the Oude Gueuze that is coming. It's an open door day of lambic producers every 2 years, and that's going to be the 9th and the 10th of May. We attract about 10 to 20,000 people circulating between lambic producers. So that's one of the highlights of
it. It is a wonderful time. I was here last year for Oude Gueuze. The buses, running loops and taking people through, a selection of lambic breweries each day. It's an incredible energy, just a 2-day party here, in the broader area. And it's something that should be on every beer lover's list.
It's really like an event to very simple, very accessible, just people coming to enjoy a good glass of Gueuze together in a nice vibe.
And then right here next to the brewery, you have revived what was once the brewery's pub or cafe, and then became a flower shop for a long time. And you've now scraped off the flooring and cleaned it up and brought it back to its what it was formerly as a place to enjoy the beer here in Beersel.
Yeah, this is the old bar of 1934. And so, I mean, after all these years of closure, we reopened it, we revived it, we give beer, food, beer kitchen, but like real proper food. We have meatballs with cherry sauce with our Oude Kriek in there and everything. So this is open during Tour de Gueuze as well, every time, but every weekend we are open, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so people can come and enjoy, visit the brewery and taste and eat here. And so next year we have Tour de Gueuze. We have it's a real focus on Belgian beer tourism next year by the government as well. This is one of the main theme actually for tourism next year in Belgium. We'll have the protection that we talked about that will come out, the renewed protection. And then we also have the project of lambic land. And so lambic land is with the province of Vlaams-Brabant here, that we are promoting this region as lambic land and stimulating people to go and visit lambic breweries and experience to drink Gueuze at the local cafe and everything. They recently brought out, together with Horal, the passport. So you now have a kind of passport that you can ask at the participating breweries, blenderies, and you can go around and collect stamps from every brewery or bars and everything. So that's really cool. So that's kind of very short term. And I think we then need to sit out a little bit the crisis due to the whole global change in beer consumption, but also the war in Ukraine and everything affects the economy. And then for Oud Beersel, we'll have to see what the future brings. I have two kids, 7 and 12, so they're still too young to decide if they want to take over or not. But my wife and I, we both work at Oud Beersel. The people that know us, they know we are very hardworking. We're always busy with the brewery, but we do not shield off our kids from the brewery. So our kids are involved. They meet importers, they meet customers, they are aware of what we are doing. So they have a good idea of what Oud Beersel is. And of course, they see we're working all the time and nobody wants to work like we are doing. But at the same time, they see also the benefits, the relationships that have, the multicultural approach to Oud Beersel. So we take them on business trips with us sometimes abroad. And so they meet people from other cultures. They speak fluent English because they're in contact with, we speak 3 languages at home. So it's easy for them to pick up other languages, but they also are interested in discovering other cultures. And so we'll see. I mean, in the past, it was normal that the son would take over the business from the father. But my opinion, if you force somebody to take over your business and they don't do it with passion, especially a business like this is not about money. This is about the product that you make, the passion, the energy that you put in, the respect that the people give you when they drink your product. And so they have to feel it themselves. If they're not interested in it, they're not going to do it well. So, but nowadays in their mind is like, okay, I want to do this job and I want to work in the brewery. They have like a dual track in their head, but they want to combine both. So it's not like, oh, I don't like beer, I don't want to work at the brewery. No. It's like we have to stop our oldest one to start drinking beer, and we buy him some non-alcoholic beer, so he's happy to drink some NA beer.
It's 4 more years, right?
Yes, 4 more years in Belgium, and then he can enjoy all the beers he wants.
Well, I can sense the passion from you, and I think that that's a great place to bring this to a close. From layout to production flow, G&D Chillers brings real-world expertise and builds reliable systems that last. Berkeley Yeast's Dry Tropics London offers their best-selling liquid yeast strain with the ease of use of dry yeast. Pactex handles are made from 100% recycled plastic and are fully recyclable. Give your customers a pleasant surprise with Audacia from Indie Hops in your next IPA. The Maidia 50/50 Flex has the power to be all freezer, all fridge, or a little bit of both. Old Orchard supplies breweries with fruit ingredients for every craft beverage, including low, no alcohol beers, hard lemonades, seltzer ciders, and more. sprightly software enhances your data-driven decision-making. And just as Gert has said, come to Flanders in 2026 to celebrate the 10th anniversary of UNESCO recognition of this unique beer and historical beer culture. If you've enjoyed this episode, go to beerandbring.com, click on that subscribe button, and help us continue to bring you conversations like this from beautiful brewers in wonderful places around the planet. Gert, if people want to learn more about Oud Beersel or come here and visit in person, where can they find you out there in the digital space as well as in real life?
So in real life, most of the time I'm here unless I'm visiting you guys or some other importer and customers abroad. But we are always here Friday, Saturday, Sunday. On Saturdays we do brewery tours, but check online on our website. All the information on oudbeersel.com is there about the visits and the activities that we do and the great food that we have and all the beers that we have here at the beer house. We have all our list on Untapped, but check out our Instagram. We post a lot on Instagram. We share with you a lot of information about the new releases, but also how we work, what we do. So follow us on Instagram. It's like instagram.com/Oud Beersel.
Some beautiful inspired beers and keeping the tradition alive while also exploring all of what that tradition has to offer with its own interesting extensions of that through all sorts of flavor. Such a cool thing. Thanks for talking with me about it on the podcast.
Okay,
Cheers.
Jamie.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.